Thank you, Ian. And as probably to some of you, Chris needs little introduction, but many don't know the depth of his adventures. Chris Cooper is a kayaker, an Arctic ski trekker, a wilderness photographer, and a professional guide based in Maple Ridge. He spent a career as an adventure guide and was instrumental in establishing the Voyager canoe business in Western Canada. He also owned the largest fleet of historical Voyager canoes in all of Canada. To capture Canada's Indigenous heritage, he commissioned First Nation artists to paint his canoes with animals like bears, wolves, eagles, salmon, and others, including that of the Raven clan. Coastal people are inspired to see them drifting into their communities, and he has earned immense respect from those very communities. Amongst the topics in his presentation tonight, Chris describes 4 of the special canoes that have carried him on his long journeys along the Alaska, BC, and Washington state coasts. Chris has journeyed all over the world, from as far north as Canada's northmost territory on Ellesmere Island, pulling gear across the ice in a sled, to paddling sea canoes along the coast of Peru. In 2008, his expeditions took him to the UK, and his connections led to an exchange between First Nations youth in BC and young people from the Orkney and Shetland Islands. Chris turns 75 this year, but his adventures are far from over. He's actually preparing for an upcoming 32-day Arctic expedition to Baffin Island next month. We're so glad to have Chris with us this evening. Please enjoy his presentation and continue to wonder at the beauty of what we commonly call the best coast. Chris, thank you for sharing your adventures with us tonight. So before we proceed, Chris, would you, if there's any questions during the presentation, would you like to have people ask you during the presentation, or would you like them to wait till the end?
Personally, Brian, just to respond to that, yes, I think it would be very nice for the audience to present questions as we're going along. We have been doing a number of presentations where there was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm on part of the audience asking questions as we went along. So certainly, I would be very much open to that. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. I will hand it over to you, and when you're ready, let me know, and I'll play the introductory video that you would like us to see.
Certainly. Thank you. Thank you again, Brian, for the invitation. It's always an honor to speak to many groups that we've come to know, and this is the first time that I've had a chance to speak with the Burke Mountain naturalists. I wanted to just give them a little bit of background. Originally, I came from the UK when I was 9.5 with my parents. We've resided in Haney and in Pitt Meadows ever since. But I have a passion for Great Britain and the UK. As you may know, that one of our canoes, Spirit Dancer, spent quite a bit of time going around that coastline. So I wanted to reflect on that later on, but just to let Brian know, he's going to help me run this because I've only done 2 Zoom meetings and presentations. So with the guidance and help, Brian, thank you very much. I wanted to just give you a very tiny sample of some of the expeditions that I have been involved in, and some of them have been incredibly long. Very arduous journeys in high Arctic Canada. So I'd like to share this video. It's actually with music. So I'll just let Brian go ahead and run that for me, and then maybe we could have a few questions after that, if you like.
No problem. Okay, I will get the video going. Okay. No one started.
So Brian, you'll have to share your screen first. So
correct. Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking for. Okay, there we go. And sorry, I couldn't see what I needed to share on my screen. Okay. Okay, so I'm just about to start playing Chris's video, Chris's introductory
Yeah,
video.
it's about 4 minutes long, or just over.
Okay. Can everybody hear the music?
No music that I can hear.
Okay, all right, then I didn't do it.
When you
right.
did share a screen, did you click
Yeah,
on share
yeah.
computer sound?
I forgot to do that. Okay. Thank you. You'd think I'd know this by now. Let's rewind. And can you hear the music now?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We can't get this full screen. I'd like to get it full screen. Click if you want to switch to different microphone or speaker. No.
No. Mute.
Amazing vistas.
Yes, you feel like you've left the planet when you're visiting these places. That's a shot looking at Pitt Lake,
Wow.
close to home. It's on the summit of the Golden Ears. Another favorite area of Chilco Lake area. Well, this is the last image. So thank you, Brian, for running that for us.
You're
Do
welcome.
do you hear me, Brian?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
It's a little, it's very different doing a Zoom presentation than a live presentation, and virtually all my presentations have been live, so it's a little different, but it's good anyway. And hopefully people enjoyed that clip. That's just a very small snippet of some of the great journeys that we've been involved in. And I'm sure that there may be a few questions around that last video there. So if anybody wants to ask questions, feel free to do so.
sure. I'll start off right at the beginning. You had all the photos of the almost like snow mountains, and they were like icebergs. So how are those formed, or are they frozen icebergs, or what the
Yes, excellent question. All those icebergs that you saw would have come mostly from the west side of Greenland, traveled across Smith Sound, and then over to Ellesmere Island, to Coburg Island and Devon Island and Baffin Island, and so on. I always had a fascination for ice, and especially the most amazing colors that you can see in these beautiful bergs. So yeah, they're just absolutely brilliant.
so these have drifted and then refrozen.
Yes, they have. Yes.
Also, I had another question about your ski touring. Do you have any problems with crevasses?
That is really dependent on when you're heading off into the mountains. So if you're doing any big glacier crossings and things like that, a lot of the time we rope up for that. But it depends on the circumstances. Most of the Arctic journeys that we travel on glaciers were generally not roped up. So, you know, when you're route finding on big glaciers, obviously you pick the safest and the most recognizable kind of route to go through. But there are other places, you know, like if you were in the St. Elias range and trying to climb Mount Logan or Mount St. Elias, or you know, some of the big peaks, yes, you would want to ski roped up.
Any more questions?
Thanks,
Yeah,
Ian.
I have a couple of questions. On your boats there, how wide are like the big ones? The what did you call them? Sorry,
Yeah, the larger canoes that would be 25 feet in length up to around 42. The beam on them are the smaller ones, 25 footers, would be 4 feet, 48 inches wide. A little more tippy than the larger canoes, which up to 42 feet would have a 6-foot beam on them. So a very different craft, the larger ones.
are they fairly flat bottomed or not?
Yeah, the smaller ones, the 25 footers, have a keel on them.
Oh,
But the larger ones don't. They're just a rounded hull, so they're easy to side slip and move around. Yeah.
Linda, we're going to see a lot of those canoes in the presentation very, very shortly. So,
Good.
yeah, you'll see some beautiful canoes, and you'll get a sense of the sizing. Yeah. So you probably have more questions after that. Okay.
one more question on
Yep.
well, the ice sculpture there. On some of them, that really was quite the sheen on the ice there. What is it melting at that point, or?
No, all the journeys we make in the high Arctic, most of them have gone in May and June. So you're going to be arriving in early May at -15 to -20. And it won't warm up to above freezing until the end of June. So on all the journeys that we've ever made, you can almost be guaranteed that you're going to have some pretty cool temperatures at the beginning of your trip. It will be going like into a winter expedition to start. So in 3 weeks' time, that's what I'll be doing. I'll be going out with the Inuit on Baffin Island, and they'll be dropping me off out on the east coast of Baffin, and I'll spend 30 days skiing a couple of 100 kilometers to various destinations that we've chosen. So we will be immersed into winter conditions when we arrive. Thanks, Linda.
Any more questions? If not, we'll proceed with the presentation. Okay.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah. Do you want me to start the PowerPoint, Chris?
Yeah, if you'd like to start with the PowerPoint, we'll just hold it on the first
Yep.
image because there's quite the story that will be told here. So once you've got that first image up, we call this Spirit of the Coast. The reason we call it Spirit of the Coast is because in 2014, we did a long trip from Kwantlen First Nation, who are our sponsors, to paddle a 25-foot canoe all the way up to Prince Rupert. Took us 3 months to get there. So this first, so the next slide, Brian, would be that one there. So, gentleman in the middle there, his name is Brandon Gabriel. He's with Kwantlen First Nation, and Brandon's been on a lot of trips with me to Orkney and to Shetland and to Chilco Lake and up the coast of BC. And he's an Emily Carr artist. And so Barbara and I, my wife and I, own this canoe that folks are standing beside. Bought this canoe in late 1980s, but it was not painted. So Brandon said he'd like to paint one of our canoes. This is a 25-foot canoe. And so he called this canoe Chief of the River. It was named by the elders of the Kwantlen First Nation. So this canoe was pretty special, and Brandon ended up owning this canoe. So he now has ownership of this canoe after the journey to Prince Rupert in it. Thank you, Brian. This is a really special canoe here. These canoes came about back in 1996. Western Canoeing out in Abbotsford was approached by Roy Vickers and the RCMP to have 3 canoes built to travel the coast from Kasan on the Skeena River all the way to Victoria, called Vision Quest. And some of you may have heard of Vision Quest. So there were 3 canoes built, and this is one of them. This canoe was paddled all the way up the coast before Vision Quest. We actually tested the canoe out because it had never been on the water before. So we spent quite a bit of time, probably over a month, 6 weeks, heading up to Bella Bella and beyond. Thanks, Brian. So Spirit Dancer canoe was named by the Katzie First Nation here in Pitt Meadows at Pitt Lake, and Spirit Dancer holds quite the story. It was built to travel to Alaska and back. So we set off with this canoe. We had it built in 2004 and set off from Prince Rupert. We actually shipped it up there by ferry up to Prince Rupert and paddled it to just south of Juneau, and then all the way back to Vancouver. And it took 104 days, over 3 months, to do that. So that's Spirit Dancer.
How long is Spirit Dancer?
42 feet. Yeah, she's a sailing canoe. We rig it up with sail, and you know, when the winds are right, it's just great to you know, have a bit of a rest, you might say, because some of these journeys have been incredibly arduous. So thanks, Brian. Yeah, we can move on to the next one, and then there'll be a story that behind every one of them. This is our most recent canoe. She's 10 years old, built by Western Canoeing out in Abbotsford, but painted by our dear friend Una Ann Moyer. She's a native artist from Dees Lake area, Tall Town native lady. and she's with the Raven clan. So Sambulian received its name from the elders of the Hunigwitine up at Choco Lake. So the more to come on that. So of course, British Columbia has many different dialects. I believe about 196 dialects of native language. I was exposed to First Nations back in the 70s, I worked actually for the corrections branch for about a dozen years, teaching Outward Bound to young offenders. So a lot of Native youth that came to us. And so I worked very closely with them. And eventually we spent a huge amount of time on the BC coast being hosted by the Native community. In fact, it is such an extensive story. I couldn't tell you all about it tonight, but one of the young Native lads from the Capilano Reserve has done over 50 trips with me. His name is Trevor Jack, and so we adopted him as a young lad to come and travel with me in the canoes on the coast, and it's been just an amazing experience with him. So this canoe being named Chief of the River, its last major journey was in 2014. We paddled it from Kwantlen First Nation on the Fraser River to Prince Rupert.
All of these canoes that he's talking about, they've gone on trips from basically Vancouver, some of them started.
Sorry, I didn't, was that somebody asking a question?
No.
No, Brian?
No.
Yeah. So that journey was a 3-month journey up the coast in 2014. So it was an amazing journey, and again, many different stops along the way with the First Nations people hosting us when we would arrive. Now then, this is not for the faint-hearted. This crossing from Nanaimo to Vancouver across the Salish Sea in a 25-foot canoe with 7 paddlers in it. This was the day of the bathtub race, actually, but there was actually 6 canoes that left Nanaimo, and only one, our canoe, ended up in Vancouver. That's at the end of the race. Further up the coast, I'm sure that some of the folks here in the audience have experience going up the BC coast, hopefully. This area, looking over to Calvert Island, this is Fitzhugh Sound, and it goes up to Bella Bella and beyond. So this is a very, very beautiful place called Fury Island. It's just off to the right of the canoe. Soul Entering Canoe was built in 1996 for a very special journey with the RCMP and also with Roy Vickers. 3 canoes were built, and this canoe, Soul Entering, was actually christened by Bob George, who was Chief Dan George's son, at Ambleside Beach in 1996. And in 1997, we had to test this canoe out to see if it was going to be seaworthy enough, and 8 of us set off and paddled it to Stewart, British Columbia, before returning down the coast the same year. So she was a beautiful canoe painted by Corey Morez. He's a Tsimshian native artist, and Barbara and I had this canoe built, but it was all white. And we decided to have Corey paint the canoe, so it actually ended up down at the Friendship Center down near Commercial Drive in Hastings. And the canoe went in downstairs in this basement, and 2 months later, Corey called me to say the canoe is now painted. And this is what you see. Absolutely beautiful. If you do have questions, certainly feel free to ask as we're kind of moving along here. This is a gathering of many canoes called tribal journeys. You may have heard of some of these journeys that do come down the coast. Every year they have different hosting communities. And in 1997, I had the opportunity to visit about 27 or 28 native villages all the way from Kisan on the Skeena River to Victoria. One of these canoes here is really just an amazing canoe. They're all beautiful in their own right, but the one that you see here, it says Quaniquala. It's the Campbell River canoe, and it was built for Frank Nelson, a 46-foot dugout. She weighs about 2 tons. And so we were very fortunate to be able to travel alongside her.
That'd be a heavy canoe. Yeah, 2 tons. Wow.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. It was 46 foot long. It would travel at about 3 knots, hull speed wise. This canoe that you're looking at is one of our, I guess it was our second large canoe built. Soul Entering is leaving from Main Island and crossing over to Sawasan. And it's a lot lighter than a dugout canoe, so we can travel at probably 4 to 5 knots. So we can travel along pretty quick with a crew of 10. On the way down the coast, because the coast is just such an amazing place to travel, and I feel very, very fortunate to have seen so many places on our BC coast. Soul Entry Canoe here is in a place called the Serpent Group. It's a group of islands south of Bella Bella, and just an amazing, beautiful white sand beach that you could have gone by it and not even seen it, but I just so happened to look to my right, and sure enough, here's this little white sand beach. So we went in and spent the day there. And of course, so many different species of wildlife. Stellar sea lions, of course, have this favorite rock very close to a place called Crib and Eden Island. And they may have a rookery of 100 stellar sea lions on this large rock. You can be almost assured they will be there to greet you. Soul Entering Canoe, again, a very, very beautiful spot she's in right here at Fury Island. This is a huge white shell beach, midden, you might call it a midden, from thousands of years of First Nations people residing here and staying here. One of the most beautiful little white sand beaches on the coast. This gentleman here, Charlie, he's on Nootka Island. And I got talking to Charlie. I said, I see you've built quite a few canoes here. Yes, he said, some of the families don't know how to build canoes, so I'm going to give them away and I house it in Flores Island. So back in 1999, I witnessed the gathering of probably 500 native people in this massive, huge longhouse, and these canoes were dedicated to some of the families that didn't have the opportunity to make their own canoes. It was very, very interesting to be part of this. Of course, on the coast, this is the mainland coast just north of Vancouver Island. I'm not sure in our audience how many people have had a chance to see this particular beach. It's called Burnett Bay. One of the most beautiful beaches on our coastline. It's very wild. It's hard to get to, so you need a boat or you need a kayak or you need a canoe to get there. So it's tucked away way up the coast north of Vancouver Island. Of course, one of the neat things there is you get lots of whales through here. You also get lots of grizzly bears and wolves and so on that beach. Yeah, in 2002, down at the south end of the beach, down there where you see the mast of the sailboat, that beach way down there, we were camped there 3 weeks, and we actually set up a documentary film for ZDF television, German TV, and spent 3 weeks filming in this area in Seymour and Belize Inlets. And the actual film was hosted on 2004 on German television of our journey.
And Chris, how far from Port Hardy would this beach be?
If you were looking from Port Hardy northwest, it'd be about 35 nautical miles. Yeah, so it's quite a little way. This is another lovely area. It's called Quakum. Quakum Inlet is south of a place called Namu. South of Bella Bella, Namu, and then the Quay River and so on. So this is another really lovely place to anchor a canoe and camp out for the night. Another shot of this is Spirit Dancer. Spirit Dancer canoe was originally built for ocean going trips, so we had customized the canoe, so we had some bulkheads built into it, a rack system, double kayaks out the side. It was originally built to paddle to Alaska and then back to Vancouver in the same year. So there she is, ketch rig and a beautiful sailing canoe. She's 42 foot long. Again, this is near Burnett Bay. Barbara and I, my wife Barbara and I have spent a lot of time at Burnett Bay over the years. And this particular rock that we're on is the only spot in the entire beach in this area that you can get out with a cell phone. So that's the only opportunity to talk to anyone, unless you got a sat phone. Of course, we carry sat phones too, but at this point we didn't have one. So this is taken probably 20 years ago.
I wonder where the cell tower was then.
You good question. Yeah, where was it? My goodness. Yeah, well, it was really a welcome to be able to know that you could actually get out, because I didn't realize that we'd be able to get out, but we tested a lot of different places there, and this rock was the place.
Weird.
Barbara in the canoe there. This is in a place called Butedale. I'm not sure of the audience as to their knowledge of the coast of BC and if they've traveled on it by boat or by ferry, but this is a place called Butedale. It's a little further north of Namu. You'll notice that Spirit Dancer here has a spray deck on it to keep the water out, of course, because we are sometimes in some pretty rough seas with it. Usually up to maybe a force 4, so a meter breaking sea or so. Another shot of Spirit Dancer, Mount Baker off to the left. This is in Bellingham Bay. We actually set off on a canoe trip from Harrison down the Harrison River, across the Salish Sea, over to Victoria, and then over into Harrow Strait and Rosario Strait, eventually to Anacortes, and then heading north back up to Vancouver. So I think this was probably 3 or 4 weeks out. And Spirit Dancer, this is in Alaska. It's a LeConte Bay. It's kind of between Ketchikan and Wrangell, Dry Strait.
How many people are routinely with you on these canoes?
On the longer trips, generally we'll go with 10 people in a gear. So we're self-sufficient for at least a month. Most of the groups that come with me are generally with me for a couple of weeks. But that particular shot you saw of LeConte Bay there, that group was with me for 32 days, where we paddled about 500 nautical miles. So we really put in some huge mileage, just almost 800K in a month. So we had a crew there of 11. Yeah, beautiful little cabins that you find in the woods as you're traveling. So we come across all sorts of things. In fact, we built one ourselves at Burnett Bay to sleep 2 people. Another shot of Spirit Dancer in LeConte Bay, Alaska. And the kayaks are very, very handy for tootling around if you're in camp, or you could also use them for anchoring the canoe out. In Alaska, they have big tides, so you're looking at 25 to 30-foot tides there. So sometimes you've got to put the canoe out on the water a quarter mile or so out from the land, put our anchor on it, and then run a long line to it and sleep with one eye open. Because you're always concerned about, I always want to be able to see the canoe if I wake up in the middle of the night. This one is just in the same kind of area there, tides out, canoe waiting for the water to come back in. A little further down south, Fury Island, and off in the distance would be Rivers Inlet, Oakino. There's a small native village way up Rivers Inlet called Oakino. Spirit Dancer eventually, kind of a long story, but I'll keep it really short. Spirit Dancer was built in 2004 and then used for 3 seasons on the BC coast, testing the canoe out mostly. And then we came up with a plan to do something different. Rather than paddling the coast of British Columbia and Alaska and Washington State, why don't we take this canoe and ship it to Great Britain and paddle around the British Isles, starting from London, out the River Thames, out through the Strait of Dover and around to Cornwall and then down to the Scilly Isles. So 3 months later, we made it down to the Scilly Isles off the southwest coast of Cornwall. And eventually we ended up in Shetland. And this is my first day in Shetland. And we had a welcoming of Apelia. They're traditionally each January, they'll have this amazing event and the burning of a longship. And they would all be dressed in this regalia. And so this is their first day with me in the canoe, and my first day on the island of Yell. Now, Spirit Dancer is based in Lerwick, Shetland. No.
Nice hats and in the regalia.
Absolutely. And if they fell in the water, they go straight to the bottom. All their
Wow.
chain link suits, their regalia was all made out of steel, and they must have weighed probably 100 pounds.
Wow.
So we didn't lose any of them, luckily. But it was a fantastic opportunity to actually film this as well. So we actually, one of my dear friends that lives in Anacortes, Washington State, has spent months and months with me filming on many different journeys. Again, you only have an hour this evening to speak, so there's just so many other really interesting journeys that have been filmed and photographed.
What are the winds and weather like compared to Great Britain, compared to the West Coast?
Oh, the West Coast here is really easy. The British coast is very, very unforgiving. Not often I can sail the canoe because the winds are always kind of changing direction all the time. Whereas Here, they're more on the BC coast, more westerly or northwesterly in the spring, summer. Whereas here, this is in the Isles of Scilly off the Cornish coast. So it was seldom that we had a chance to really have a good sail. Here on this coastline, some of the longer days, we've sailed 40 nautical miles with a canoe without a paddle stroke. So we use the Canadian flag as a square rig for it. So my friend Doug's holding the canoe here. It's anchored at the stern, but we're getting ready to go because it is nice to get a sail in on occasion. So moving on to our fourth canoe. Our canoe Sambulian was named by the elders of the Honeyguatine up at Choco Lake. And Una Ann on the left, she's the one that designed and painted my canoe for me. And I was speaking with her before she started this painting. I said, Una Ann, I would really love for you to paint our canoe, something special. And she said she'd love to do that and honored to do so. So 3 or 4 months later, she painted all these beautiful creatures on the side of my canoe. The gentleman off to her right here, he's a Squamish pastor. Iqualam is his name. He's with the Squamish Nation. Iqualam said that he'd like to bless our canoe. This is Ambleside Beach. This is very moving to talk about it. But he would say, Chris, you see the eyes on the creatures of your canoe. I'm going to touch them with these cedar boughs. I'm going to wake these creatures up for you. And they're going to keep you safe on the water. It just left me with I just couldn't speak. It was just the most amazing thing that he told me. And they're dead serious about what they're talking about. Because we all know when we're traveling on the ocean, especially paddle power, there's many, many accidents. And many accidents with First Nations as well. I've lost dear friends, Jerry Jack, drowned off of the coast of just in Juan de Fuca Strait, heading south down to one of the reserves on the Washington State coast. So there are incidents, very sadly. I've been very, very fortunate. I'm still here. Sambulian has touched the lives of so many people. Here you see the hands are up, and when you come into the community, you come with respect. Una Ann is a Raven. She's from the Raven clan, so I wanted her to be up front, right up in the bow. And then we have the wolf, the eagle, the bear, the salmon, the seal, the orca painted on the side of that canoe. And we have a very special set of paddles that we use. They're called kelp paddles. They're all painted with the creatures that you see here. And you'll see them. This area is called the Broughton Archipelago. I don't know if you've been there before, but it is a very, very beautiful place. Unbelievable scenery and beautiful places to come ashore, have a picnic lunch, or to camp, pitch a tent. But this is a lovely place, not far from a place called Port McNeill on Vancouver Island. This would be Spirit Dancer. Spirit Dancer canoe is heading up into Desolation Sound and Toba Inlet. The peak off to the left is a very beautiful peak up at the head of Toba. And again, reflecting on some of these beautiful places. This is on the Fury Island in the Penrose group, looking over to Rivers Inlet. You can see the paddles that are now resting, the handle, the T-grip on the handle there is on the gunwale of the canoe. When you come in to greet or to be welcomed, it's always in respect to have your paddles up. As you can see, the paddles are all painted beautifully by Una Ann, and they're called a kelp paddle. The Squamish Nation use that style and shape of paddle for paddling their canoe, called Cahoth. It's a 46-foot dugout canoe, and I've traveled in it as well. Just amazing. So here we are with our paddles up. Again, the most amazing thing is traveling in this way. You get to see so much. This is a place called Malcolm Island, and we've made quite a few trips to Sontula and paddle around Malcolm Island, and it's a really beautiful place, not far from Port McNeill and Alert Bay. Now, this shot here, Trevor, the lady holding the marine chart is pointing it towards Trevor. Now, Trevor is with the Capilano Reserve, and I've met him when he was 17 years of age. He's been on over 50 trips with me and helped me immensely on a lot of the journeys, moving gear and equipment, helping to manage the canoe, helping to load it, keeping an eye on the chart, understanding how to read the chart. So he's been a lovely fellow who calls me Dad. Amazing. Closer to home now, this is, of course, the seawall at Stanley Park. Sometimes we take the canoe out and we'll launch it either over in West Vancouver along the waterfront there, or we'll launch it down by the Maritime Museum and travel in the local areas. It's it's just a lovely spot too. A little bit better weather day here, coming out of False Creek and heading over to West Vancouver. This particular shot was taken in the Gulf Islands. There's been many journeys to the Gulf Islands, and yeah, so I guess we're coming closer to the end of the show right now. Grizzly bears and the quay. The quay is a magical place. When you're traveling this way by canoe or by kayak, but with the canoe has a real special journey because the native community paddled dugout canoes for thousands of years on our coastline. So it's really nice to come up. So off the main channel, you can come up this little river called the Quay, and you can almost be assured you're going to see grizzly bears in there. So we'll go in there and we'll camp there. Never had a problem with them. And that's Barbara at Burnett Bay, and our camp is off to the right of the photo. You might be able to see it there. There's something yellow. We spent many weeks camping on this beach and traveling into various areas with the canoe. It's all exposed ocean traveling here, so you got surf everywhere. But occasionally you get some excellent days for travel.
Philip, you have a question?
I see somebody's asking a question. Phil?
Yeah. You were talking about the Broughton Archipelago. I'm just wondering, did you see the fish farms? I guess the First Nations have decided to not consent to those fish farms anymore. Did you see them when you were canoeing there?
Oh, yes, off of Swanson Island, yes. Yeah, they're coming to a close. Alexander Morton, as you know, I know her quite well. And Robert Mountain with Alert Bay with Namgis Nation. It's a really big deal. you know, they just don't want these farms any longer. And so it's quite a big story, that one. But yeah, I've seen them out there in many different places, all the way up the coast. Very typical camp spot on the BC coast. And yeah, when you're out there, there's no shortage of firewood, so it's always nice to have a campfire. And life is very simple out there, but it can be pretty intense as well when you're traveling in these canoes. So you got to really make good calls all the time. You can't make a mistake. And I think that's one of the last images, Brian. Burnett
Beautiful
Bay. This shot is taken at 10 o'clock at night at Burnett Bay.
And there we go. And that's the end of the presentation. So do we have any questions for Chris after the presentation? Certainly an excellent look at our coastline and some of the amazing opportunities for people who wish to adventure on a somewhat extreme level.
When he goes to Baffin Island, is he going to be doing the skiing or the canoeing or both, or what?
Thanks for your question. Yeah, this journey to Baffin Island is on skis. So we'll be on skis for the entire trip. It's about 30 days roughly.
And is that trip from point A to point B?
It's actually from A to B and back. So it'll be about 200 kilometers roughly. We drag all our own supplies. Each sled will weigh in at around 80 to 90 kilos. So almost 200 pounds of gear and equipment. Generally, the rule of thumb is that for every day that you're out there, you're looking at 1 kilogram of food per day per person. So I just shipped 200 kilos of food to Clyde River about a week ago.
How many people are going with you?
There's 7 of us, including myself.
Uh-huh.
And the terrain, is it up and down or fairly flat?
We'll be climbing over a few passes. We'll have 5 camps en route over the sea ice. We'll also be doing side trips from camps. So we'll have a camp set up for 5 days roughly, and then we'll do side trips and photograph the area. So we're starting in a place called Eglinton Fjord, being dropped off by the Inuit by Snow Machine and Comatic, and we will travel from Eglinton Fjord to Gibbs Fjord. So we go through Samford Fjord. It's a place that is so unbelievably beautiful. The reason I say that is that we're going to be in these big fjords that have rock walls that are almost a mile high, just under. And so it'll be a very, very exciting journey. One of the youngest that's going, he's 43 years younger than I. He's 32. He's a Nepalese young lad who was adopted by some friends of ours, and he's going to do a story about his experience of going to Baffin Island for the Nepalese newspaper.
Fabulous, yeah. The medium range weather forecast. So when you're there, are you expecting much in the way of snow and or blizzard conditions? Do you expect reasonably plain trekking?
Yeah, it will be winter conditions, certainly at the beginning, and probably for the first 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be probably between -10 and -15. So winter conditions. The weather can be very variable. You will be assured that you'll have wind. wind in the fjords. You get rivers that are frozen solid. We'll be walking on rivers that are totally frozen, and we'll be on micro spikes most likely. Either that or on skis with skins on if there's snow on the ice.
Got a question, or Malice has got her hand up, and we have a question from the chat as well.
Yeah.
Malice, do you want to?
It's Milas. I was
Sorry.
just wondering how you raise money for your trips.
Well, if you're traveling in the Arctic, it's incredibly expensive to go anywhere. If I was going to buy my ticket to go to Resolute from Vancouver, $7,500 return, one person.
Wow.
So I have points. And with those points, in 2019, Jerry Arctics, I got everybody up there on my points, and we saved them $46,000. So we got them all the way up to Resolute, and then from Resolute out by Twin Otter aircraft, $22,000 to hire that, charter it out, and the folks picked up the tab for that, which was great. But some of the fundraising that happens is not so much for the Arctic, but more so for like Great Britain. We had huge sponsors to get that canoe to Great Britain. Rotaries helped hugely. First Nations did. Lots of companies, BCIT, UBC, many different sponsors, including the RNLI and the Coast Guard as well. So we had over 70 sponsors for the UK canoe project. I have just, well, Brian may have mentioned that my wife and I have produced a book about some of those great adventures, but there needs to be a book done for Great Britain. And so we're moving over to Great Britain to write. I want to write another book about the canoe journey around UK, because it was very worthy. It was an incredibly difficult journey to start with, but the amount of logistics were huge. It was way bigger than planning any Everest expedition. So there we are.
Fabulous. Any more questions?
I have one. My hand's up.
Oh,
Okay.
Susan, go for it.
Sorry.
I'm wondering about when you're traveling on the BC coast, some of the foods that you're able to harvest from the sea and the land.
Yes, definitely. We obviously that we will have fishing gear for, for fishing for bottom fish and also for salmon along the way. A lot of the times the native people, when we stop in, will actually provide amazing luncheons or dinners for us when we come. We're treated like royalty. But generally speaking, we will be self-sufficient for 30 to 60 days. We would carry that in the canoe. So we take everything with us. But when we do go ashore, there's lots of edible fruits, of course. Yeah, so we'll take advantage of that too. Just simple things, like blueberries or huckleberries or cranberries into pancakes and things like that. So we eat very well.
Beautiful natural food. Yep.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Any further questions?
I guess for myself, just one sort of comment, and I thought it was quite funny, Chris, where you just sort of nonchalantly talked about canoeing from Vancouver to Stewart. If people realize how far Stewart is, that's a a lifetime or an incredible journey for anybody, and you just sort of as a sort of a side trip almost. So
yeah. Well, yeah, it's such a fascinating story to think about planning. Like, people say, oh, we're going to go to Victoria for the weekend. Well, we would just set off in a canoe and canoe to Victoria. But the fascination of the BC coast is, I say it's a real treasure. It's very, very much a jewel of our province. Our BC coast is very, very spectacular. So many beautiful places to go. And yes, if you're thinking about doing a really long trip, for me, it's like, oh, we're going to go for a couple of months or 3 months. I just don't bat an eye. That's just what I do, and I love it. I love to take people with me to experience some of the most marvelous welcomings with First Nations in particular. But you know, it's not just First Nations, it's many, many different people that live on the coast that provide amazing welcomings. If they see that canoe coming, they're really quite thrilled that they're seeing something that's being paddled all the way from Vancouver.
Yeah. Even though they live there, they find it amazing that somebody could do that.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. It's very arduous. It's very difficult. The logistics are unbelievable, and also the weather plays a huge role. And you have to have lots of patience. You cannot just risk it and go out and say, okay, we're going to paddle it. Yeah, we're going to have big headwinds and so on. You just have to be patient and wait. And that's how the native people traveled. They went with the weather. And they probably travel, a lot of the time they would have traveled at night when the winds are down.
And do you use the tides to your advantage as well?
Absolutely. The tides play a huge role. You know, just for example, if you're coming down through from Port McNeill down into Johnstone Strait and then into Seymour Narrows, of course, that is a very, very, very dangerous spot to bring a canoe down through. So on the VHF Marine radio, you must contact Coast Guard to find out when is the right moment to run through there, because you can't see it until you're on it. So that is always taken into consideration. But there's many other rapids, like around Quadra Island and beyond north up into Nakwekto, up to Seymour and Belize Inlets, that have huge, huge rapids. And you've got the speed of the current is running sometimes as much as 15 knots. Very, very dangerous stuff.
Yeah, a lot of people don't.
Yeah.
I was going to say, a lot of people don't realize that standing waves and like you say, rapids on the ocean is not what a lot of people see.
That's right. Just to touch base on that too is, like for me, a lot of my training was in whitewater and learning how to read rivers, of all kinds of rivers. So, you know, starting up at Stewart Lake and going down through many of the different river systems there, including the Fraser, of course, the Thompson River. A lot of my training with big canoes was on the Thompson River, between Savannah and Spence's Bridge, not down through the canyon, but the canoes that we were using were 25 feet long, but we would learn how to paddle these large canoes under difficult conditions. And so all of that you collect. And so you bring a lot of confidence to knowing what you can do. Last summer, we were in up at Egmont, Skookumchuck. You know, that's a very, very dangerous place to take a big canoe unless you know how to run it and understand when you should be running it. So there's lots of very important decisions that are being made.
Great. We do have a question or multiple questions in the chat. One of them's, do you have any issues with predators, namely polar bears? On your upcoming trip to Baffin Island, will you have this issue? Do you have some?
Yeah, thanks for that question, Ian.
Yeah,
When we're traveling in the Arctic, most of the time when we're up there, we're in areas that are so remote that yes, you're going to see polar bears. Devon Island is one of those places. Devon Island, East Coast, we saw 19 bears in 30 days. The bears are very inquisitive and they will approach you. But the reputation that they're supposed to have, really, they don't have that kind of reputation because they don't really just come and attack you. They want to know who you are and they'll come, they're very inquisitive. But we carry a lot of interesting defense mechanisms, including critter getters. And critter getters are a 9-volt battery that runs a sensor system, which anything that walks by it within 10 to 15 meters, it will sound an alarm that you will not want to hear. It's incredibly loud and it will scare anything off. We have bear bangers, small pistols like little derringers. We do carry a 12-gauge shotgun on some of the trips, but nowadays we're not really using them very often at all. It's just there. Up on Ellesmere Island, 4 years ago in 2019, we had one mother and a cub come very close to our camp off on the sea ice. But again, they were just inquisitive and then they were off running down the sea ice. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, sure. And we should probably wrap this up unless there's another one quick question.
Well, and I can just say from a personal perspective, I've had the pleasure of canoeing only once, sadly, with Chris from in one of the large canoes. I think it was probably it was about 16 of us, I think, in the canoe traveling from Rocky Point Park over to Deep Cove and back. And that was a very simple but amazing experience to experience that. Just, it was a beautiful day too. Like it wasn't hot, it wasn't cold, the water was nice and calm. It's just a beautiful paddling experience. We had lunch over at Deep Cove and then paddled back, and yeah, just a fabulous. The canoe, I think, I'm not sure, was that Spirit Dancer? Probably not.
What year was that roughly, Brian?
It would have been about the mid 2010s, so 15, 16 maybe.
Yeah, so Spirit Dancer went to Great Britain in 2008, so it was probably in the canoe called Sambulian.
Could have been, yes.
Because we've had that canoe since 2010.
Okay, yeah, that's the one it was. Yeah,
yeah,
fabulous, just a great experience. So, thank you, Chris. Okay, any more questions? Any questions in the chat? Ian, I think you got those.
Yep.
Yep, thank you. There was a comment from Diane. I was in Lerwick, June 2018, was supposed to kayak, but weather not good. Thank you. Grandfather was lighthouse keeper in Shetland. Great to see.
Oh, I wonder where that was.
Diane, do you want to speak to that? You're on mute, Diane.
Diane, you're on mute.
Yeah.
Here you are.
Yeah, I was in Shetland because my grandfather was a lighthouse keeper at 3 of the lights there, and my father wrote a lot about it. So I went in June of 2018, and I had planned to kayak. I booked before I went, but that week it happened to be very stormy, so unfortunately I wasn't able to kayak. But it was wonderful. The first one was well, Bressie was where my father wrote so much about, and then Muckle Flugga up at the top, and Sunbury Head down at the south end. So just you brought back wonderful memories of Shetland when you mentioned that. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome, Diane. In fact, those two places that you just mentioned, I've canoed to both ends, from the south end to the north end. Muckle Flugga Lighthouse out Burra Firth, and I was all alone with a crew of 10 paddling out in the big swells and people getting seasick. Off of Sunbury Head, right beneath the lighthouse, the canoe was in there. Just the most amazing place.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
Yeah, my-
Shetland is the most amazing place.
Yeah.
And the people, we had over 2,000 people in our canoe spread over several seasons. Shetland was a fantastic place. Yes.
I'll have to send you my father's story. I wrote a book about his story called A Son of Shetland.
Lovely. Yes, please do. Yeah. You could, Brian, maybe you could let the people that are here this evening, let them know about our Facebook site, because there's hundreds and hundreds of images and stories on it, which includes Shetland and Orkney and the coast of Britain and so on. So please let them know.
Chris, when I send out because we'll upload this video to our YouTube channel, when I send out an email to the whole membership telling them that the video is available, I will include, if that's okay, I will include your email address, and I will also include a link to your Facebook so that people can access those resources as required. So, and just to finish off, we have to wrap up. Would you like to tell people about your book and maybe just show the cover? And I'll speak to details of the book in my email.
Right.
Okay.
So
Somebody likes it.
So the picture you're seeing on the cover of my book is a 50-day ski trip all the way from Greasefjord on Ellesmere Island to Coburg and back, which is one of the most amazing ski journeys I've ever done. And I'm so glad that my wife and I have put together this book, which covers so many expeditions over the last 60 years.
Yeah.
So
it's how many pages? It's about
there's 240 pages.
240 pages of beautiful color photographs.
Yes.
Just beautiful.
So yeah, what can I say? I'm just very, very lucky to see these wonderful places, I must say.
Yeah, and we're lucky to have you speak tonight. Thank you, Chris.
You're most welcome. Great honor. Thank you so much.
Okay. Okay.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to do some wildlife sightings very shortly, I think, and cover some other subjects. You're quite welcome to stick around if you want to see some of those. But at this point, thank you, Chris. I'll hand back to Ian.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Brian.
Okay.
Thank you all.
So Brian, I thought we were going to go to wildlife sightings.
Okay, then pass back to me.
Okay, back to you. Handoff.
Absolutely. Okay, so let me get all these photos teed up. Okay.
And we probably will run a little bit over tonight. So, but if people feel they need to leave, feel free to leave. You don't have to get out of your chair and show that you're leaving. So.
Okay, so I will now share my screen. Okay, so first, can everybody see my screen?
We're starting to. There you go.
Okay, is Carol with us tonight? Carol Edwards?
I didn't see her name.
No. Okay, this is Carol's photograph. I can't speak to it. I'm sorry.
It's flowers and a rock.
There we go. It would appear to be the case. Okay. Now, how do I go to the next? There we go. This might be Ian MacArthur's photograph.
It is. So this is, for people that are familiar with Victoria, the Gorge. We saw some canvasbacks there. So that was with Michelle and Ty, who are BMM members in Victoria. And this was the first time Michelle and Ty had seen canvasbacks, and probably my first time as well. So that was great to see.
Another Ian.
Yeah, so this is a nest box at my place. Successful, believe it's chickadees that nested in there. Never saw them come or go, but they put in a very nice nest. And I clean boxes at Liz Thunstrom's place, and so it was interesting to compare what we believe are both chickadee nests, how different they are. So this one, you'll see they left all the shavings in the bottom and lots of hair, just a tiny little bit of cedar shavings and moss. And then I think if you carry on, you'll see Liz's there, and there's Liz with her box and nest, and they'd taken all the shavings out of the box and filled it with a whole bunch of cedar strips.
Wow, picky.
And I think next photo will probably just be a close-up of it, seeing what it's, it's like First Nations weaving almost. So, and again, dog hair as well on the top bit. And this is in Liz's backyard. So I know some people have ponds in their backyard, but Liz gets mallards in her pond. So you can see in the background a male and female mallard. And then the next photo is probably a close-up of the two. There we go. So pretty special to have ducks in your backyard. And this was actually on the BMN hike to Belcarra Bluffs. On our way back, we saw the sign on the access road saying about watch for newts. And sure enough, on the trail, someone almost stepped on one of the newts. And that's my my camera pouch on the left, just for a tiny point and shoot. So it gives you an idea of how big the newts are. And then the next photo is probably just a close-up of the newt. So these are rough skin newts.
Hello, do you hear me?
Yep.
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Okay, so carry on, Brian.
And John Saremba.
Oh, this is a view looking along the frontage road. And on the right side, you have a series of local residents that live adjacent to Gillies Quarry. Many of you might know that there's a proposal to expand the quarry by 50%. And that would then end up with a berm, new access road, and a brand new overburden waste dump being put with the tow just to the left of that access road. That's what the residents would be facing as their view if this proposal goes ahead. So there's quite a few people that have submitted, including BMN, written objections to this proposal, including the additional import of materials along a road, which is really unsafe for large truck transport. It's the road that goes into Widgeon Marsh Regional Park. This is some of the habitat that you're looking at in one of the ephemeral stream basins. It's wonderful, high quality habitat for wildlife. And this is actually Crown leased land. So we're trying to find out what are the requirements for quarries on Crown leased land versus private property. We think there may be a difference, and we're hoping that our objections will get the Ministry of Mines to reconsider whether this should be completely filled over with waste and overburden and then subject to who knows what type of reclamation. And we've had several walks out there, and the local residents were very pleased with a wide variety of individuals and groups coming together, because up until just about 3 or 4 weeks ago, when this project was announced, there was only a little ad in the local newspaper right adjacent to the obituaries about this mine upgrade plan. And thank goodness the Northeast Coquitlam Ratepayers Association brought it to the attention of local politicians. Even the City of Coquitlam Council were not aware that this project had put in a major expansion application. It was residents that brought it to their attention, much to their surprise. And this is a quarry development application, and the top upper right, the areas in green are right now undeveloped. They're mature forest areas, wildlife habitat, very good wildlife habitat. And those are the areas that a new dump will be placed on, overburden dump. And it shows the area in the bottom left, which is immediately adjacent to the Pitt River, where the mine quarry expansion is going to go. And most people don't really see the quarry from the road. It's hidden by a large berm, but anyone who's kayaked or canoed along the river, it's just a horrendous sight, unfortunately. I'm not opposed to mine development myself, but I'm hoping that it can be done in a much more sustainable manner with a great deal more care and attention to reclamation. And it's ironic that on the one hand, this mine is about maybe less than a kilometer away from Widgeon Marsh Regional Park boundary, that the Metro Vancouver is trying to encourage a high quality visitor experience. And on the other hand, you have this major scar that's going to be left on the landscape within reach, easy reach of kayaking or paddling from the park. And this is just one of the signs. That's the entrance to Gillies Quarry. It looks really benign driving by. Very few people have ever been inside the quarry, but if you happen to ever kayak by, you get a totally different view from the water of this quarry. And this is the actual berm. This is the berm that would be completely removed and relocated immediately adjacent to the residence, along with the road on the left would be moved over. And there's all sorts of issues with fugitive dust, noise, blasting. And you can imagine what the residents think of this proposal. And this is a look looking uphill from the quarry entrance. This is an extremely steep hill, and quite often unfortunately the quarry operator will take unlicensed large equipment, and rather than taking it out on a low bed, they'll take it up the hill without any lights, without pilot cars, illegally on the road, and they'll cut off access for any emergency responders or traffic the whole time that the vehicles are being brought up. And it was only because the residents were able to take pictures over time and show them to Coquitlam City of Coquitlam Council that they brought attention to this major traffic issue. On to a little brighter note. I've got a few pictures of some recent birds. It's always lovely to see spring. It's come a little bit later this year. And here we have an American goldfinch just merrily looking at trying to get some seeds. It's lovely to see these birds back. And I just happened to be at Blakeburn the other day, and I got very fortunate because a Cooper's hawk, and I posted this on Birds of BC to get an ID confirmation, because it looks fairly similar to a sharp-shinned hawk, but the rounded tail, the size, the eye color, the shape of the head, it was confirmed it was actually a Cooper's hawk. We have several in the area at Blakeburn, and they're of differing colors. So I appreciate the opportunity to get a confirmation, and also appreciate the patience of the bird while I set up my camera. And this is a really interesting little site. We're thrilled. A couple of my good neighbors, Loretta and Jim Teasel, and myself and Christina, last year we were privileged to watch for the first time that we know of, much like Como Lake, this is at Blakeburn. We had 5 little greblets, pie-billed grebe parents, had 5 little chicks, and this is with the zoom camera and cropped in. So I was roughly about 50 meters away. So the nest is very well hidden, and much to my surprise the other day, I saw a male and female pie-billed grebe looking around, and I think they may be selecting this as a nesting site. It's immediately adjacent to where they had their little raft of material in among the bulrushes. So we're really hoping they're going to be successful this year again. And I've always have an interest in finding out when spring really arrives, and I have several indicators. One is the return of the tree swallows to Blakeburn and a Colony Farm. Another is when the snails at Colony Farm emerge. And I was delighted about a week ago to walk along the Mundy Creek Trail at Colony Farm right near Lougheed Highway. And there's small patches of stinging nettle where there's a variety of brown-lipped and also Oregon forest snails, which are quite an endangered species. And the Oregon forest snail have a real affection for eating stinging nettle. And I couldn't figure out why stinging nettle, but it turns out that stinging nettle is really high in calcium, which is quite useful for strengthening their shell. So I believe this is an older Oregon forest snail because the shell has actually lost a lot of its original brown color, and we should have one more or two more pictures of a group of them happily munching away on the stinging nettle.
I wish they'd eat more.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And here is a different portion of the trail, another section. And one of the unfortunate things about the Monday Creek Trail is that there's a continual challenge for the park staff because the trail is very narrow and they're not allowed to widen it for archaeological purposes or move it. And there's a real challenge with people riding their bikes through there. There's a fair amount of snails, unfortunately, that like to go from one side of the trail to the other. And you can imagine when the person coming through there on a bike doesn't really have time or the patience, and we get quite a few mortalities from that. So Metro Vancouver set up a special gate system, has set up signs, but they still have challenges with people not wanting to walk their bike that half a kilometer section. They don't understand the value of these snails. So we're hoping over time that the trail will get moved over. And here's one of the first tree swallows looking at a box that was put up in the old field as part of our Colony Farm bird survey. We get a chance to see some of these delightful birds, and this one's having a look. And about 2 weeks later, on the next survey that I was involved in, I think it's on the next slide, we have tree swallows, and I happened to catch one just getting ready to land on the lower box. And we suspect, as last year, that they'll take an interest, but we never did find out or see if they actually had young that fledged out of there. But it's encouraging to see the tree swallows back, along with violet greens. We also get northern roughwing, and we may have had in the past, we certainly get barn swallows, but we may have had a cliff swallow there as well. And finally, we were really thrilled that after a few years of hard work with some local volunteers in the city of Port Moody, they became the 5th city in British Columbia to get the BC Bat Program Bat-Friendly City certification. So it speaks well for their efforts and BMN support in trying to enhance bat habitat and make people more aware of bat conservation. And here's some of the volunteers, along with Emily Gutenberg, who's the new environmental technician in the city of Port Moody. And just to the left of her is Danielle Desjardins, who's a very experienced bat biologist and a super representative of the BC Bat Community Program, who gave the certificate just a few weeks ago to the mayor of Port Moody.
There's a significant BMN representation there.
Yes, and kudos to Jim Atkinson and Judy Taylor Atkinson. They really were the ones that initially supported this program in terms of bringing it to the Environmental Protection Committee in Port Moody, who then made a recommendation to City Council to adopt this program. And they've done all sorts of wonderful work, not only with bats, but birds like the herons, purple martin, beavers, you name it. They're just amazing conservationists.
Fabulous.
Great photos,
Yeah.
John.
Thank you.
Yes, very much so. Susan.
Hi, this is a beaver, of course, on the pond right behind my house in Coquitlam River Park. And you can go to the next slide too. They're all the beavers.
Yep.
So I'm thrilled to see it back now, back out of its lodge. In the fall, it built quite a dam that was inhibiting the salmon from going upstream to spawn. So the city of Coquitlam dismantled the dam, and the pond level dropped significantly. So I was afraid the beaver may have gone elsewhere, but it has stuck around. And here it is. Unfortunately, it's eating, so you can't see its head, but watching it, is the mandarin duck, which has been frequenting the pond system for the past 2 years. It hangs around with the wood ducks. So they were having a friendly little chat here, the mandarin duck and the beaver.
Great to get them in the same photo.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Yes.
Really nice.
And that's it. That's it. Thank you,
That's-
everybody,
that's-
for submitting their photos.
Okay.
There we go. Thank you, John. Thank you, Susan. And thank you, Ian.
Yeah, I think
And
Chris.
Carol.
I think Chris is gone. I don't see him on there, but
Correct.
But yeah,
Yes.
yeah, didn't get a round of applause, but no, it was a fabulous presentation. And we are just a little bit late here, so unless there's anything anybody needs to say, I think we'll bring the meeting to a close. Any comments, questions?
No.
Nope. Great. Okay. Well, thanks everybody for joining us from your living room, your home, or wherever you are, or from a trip, I guess, on Ron's case.
Yeah.
And so our next meeting will be Thursday, May 11th, and it'll be a Zoom meeting. Presenter will be Stephen Shepard, and we'll be talking about the Cool Hood Champs program. So thanks again, everybody, and have a lovely evening. What's left of it, and we'll see you in not quite a month.
Yep. You want the executive to stay on?
Sure, if they'd like to.
Okay.
Yeah, who's
Okay.
around?
Have a good night, everybody.
Bye-bye. Good night.
And you can stop recording